Is recording. Barb, it's
Okay.
over to you.
Okay, great. Well, good morning. Well, good afternoon now, just barely, everyone. Welcome to the Public Safety Communications Task Force feedback session. I'm hearing some background noise. Maybe you can mute, please. There we go. Perfect. Welcome again. My name is Barbara Neal. I'm Executive Director of the Enhanced 911 Board and co-chair of the task force, along with Commissioner Jennifer Morrison from the Department of Public Safety. We have Paul White is here from the task force as well. He's our vice chair. And I believe if he hasn't joined us yet, he may. Michael Wright is also expected to be here. He's the CEO of Calex Ambulance and a task force member. I want to get right into the feedback session, so let me get through this intro information pretty quickly. We'll go through some housekeeping and introductions in just a few minutes. Why we're here, I'll give you a very quick task force update. We'll have a project schedule update as well, and then we will get into the thick of things with the stakeholder feedback discussion and wrap it up at the end with a quick discussion of next steps. So you may have noticed at the beginning, the meeting is being recorded, so be aware of that. When you're asking questions or giving comments, it's helpful if you state your name and organization. And just a reminder that this town hall meeting is focused on gathering feedback from public safety practitioners and government officials, specifically regarding the content of the system design plan working draft. Okay, so quickly here, as a reminder, the task force was created in 2023 by Act 78 and tasked with the planning and implementation of a reliable, secure, and interoperable statewide public safety communication system. That system is to be equitably and sustainably financed, universally accessible to everyone in the state, and it's expected to enhance, strengthen, and build upon previous efforts and initiatives. So to accomplish this work, the task force has been meeting regularly since the end of June 2023. And we have produced, with the help of our consultants, who I'll introduce in a moment, we've produced 2 documents. One is the inventory and assessment document, and the other is the document that we're here to discuss today, the system planning draft document. I want to give you just two things to keep in mind as we go through today. One is just a thank you. We want to let you know how much we appreciate and value all of your input and feedback. We look forward to hearing what you like and what you don't like about the plan and what you see as your priorities as we're moving forward. And the task force all along has said and continues to say that we have no preconceived notion of what the future structure of the Vermont communication system looks like. So your input and the input of others is essential to determining what the system will look like moving forward and how it will be managed and governed. So thank you all for being here. Let's go to the next slide, Bonnie, and I can, or Jason, I can go over the task force members. So as I mentioned, Commissioner Jen Morrison is the vice chair. Is the co-chair, and Paul White, who's with us today, is the vice chair. Jim Mack is the representative for a PSAP overseen by a municipal police department. He's the PSAP administrator at Shelburne PD. We also have as a task force member, Mayor Mike Dunges from the city of Rutland. He's the municipal representative appointed by Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Ron Kumitz is another task force member. He is the chief of the Alburg Fire Department and is representing or appointed by the Vermont State Firefighters Association. And then Michael Wright, as I mentioned, who may join us today. I don't see him in the list just yet. Michael, if I'm missing you, I apologize. but Michael is CEO of Calex Ambulance. Okay, we can move on. So I mentioned two consultants that have worked with us over the past not quite a year. First is a company called Televate. We have Rick Burke and Dom Arcuri here from Televate. They were hired as the task force's project management team and really have served in the role of trusted advisor to the task force throughout this entire project. And the second consulting firm that we hired is our system planning consultants from Mission Critical Partners. Bonnie, you've already heard from today, is one of the representatives from MCP on the call today, and there are several others that you may hear from throughout the call. So thank you to everybody for being here today, both from the consulting team and from the stakeholder group and from the task force. And I will hand this now over to Dom Arcuri from Televate to take us through where we are in the project plan. And thank you all again.
Thank you very much, Barb, and thank you to everyone present today. Happy Friday, happy Pi Day for those engineers and nerds out there. As Barb mentioned, this team has been working together a year now, a little bit more, I believe, and of course the task force has been working since 2023 to get to this point where we have a system design plan. You have the draft that you have hopefully reviewed and that we're going to discuss today. To get here, we went through an extensive inventory collection process where all 37 dispatch centers that dispatch Vermont agencies were visited and interviewed. That includes 31 within the state and 6 actually outside of the state in surrounding states. All those dispatch centers, as I mentioned, were interviewed. They also filled out a survey form. We compiled all of that and put together an extensive inventory and assessment report, as Barb mentioned. That is currently being reviewed for sensitive information before it is released to the public. Hopefully that'll be available next week for you to review. There are some portions of that that were included in the system design plan, the trends and insights portion that, of course, contribute to the plan. Following that, there was a very thorough assessment of all the existing systems and policies and procedures that support dispatch throughout the state, and that has led to development of the draft system design plan that we have to discuss here today. It's important to note that the system design plan includes several options in all of the key areas that Mission Critical Partners has put together. So there are several options. The intent is to evaluate each of those options to determine the best course for the state moving forward. And we will be gathering input through this process, as this is the third review session we've had, as well as we have a couple scheduled next week for public input as well. And you can provide comments certainly here today. You can go to the task force website and also provide comments in that form. We will be accepting comments through March 28th. So a couple more weeks yet, and then we will be reviewing and compiling those comments and updating the draft plan as appropriate. And so shortly after we receive those comments and look further into the design plan, probably within a month, so the April timeframe, we hope to have the final design plan to present. We also have one more workshop that will be next week, a funding workshop, which I believe Bonnie will discuss also. with some key legislators within the state. That is set for Monday, and we'll be discussing options for funding the results of the design plan and equitable cost sharing. So now I'd like to turn it back to Bonnie to get into the meat of the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Barb. And thank you, everybody, again for being here. As I mentioned, this is the third session that we have had. I see some familiar faces in the list of attendees, so that's great to see you guys again. And as they know, and to let you know, if you participated in any of the other town halls, we just kind of like to, kind of level set. We understand some of you may be sitting in the dispatch center and doing other tasks, but we do ask you be present. Of course, be candid. We need information. Last night's session got a little slower start, but once people got rolling in discussion, we got some really great candid feedback. So please do not hold back, but at the same time be respectful. Listen as partners, and criticize if you're gonna, that's great. Again, it's that candid piece, but please also with some ideas. If you have some solutions, what's some language that would be better suited? Do you think that would make this document improve the opportunity for success, if you will? And in that, because we are talking a statewide perspective, as you're listening as partners, to please try and think big picture. We do tend to be more concerned about our local jurisdiction, where we live, where we serve, those types of things. This is a very large project, a lot of moving parts, so please try and think big picture as well. And if there are those moments that we do get off topic, or maybe something pops up and it's like, oh yeah, we may really want to talk about that maybe a little bit more, explore it. Jason's going to be manning the parking lot, if you will. He'll take those ideas, put them in there, so at least we capture them for further discussion later on. Jason's also monitoring the chat. So if for some reason maybe you don't have a microphone, you have a lot of background, engage in the chat, and we will make sure that we are answering and responding to those questions as well. So we're going to start big picture at first, first impressions, kind of talk about the document as a whole, and then we are going to get much more focused, and we're going to break down the document. And when I say break it down, solicit your feedback based on each individual section of the document. That helps kind of keep our thoughts organized, as well as when we start to compile things later on, like Dom mentioned. So I'm going to open it up onto the floor. This is, like I said, the interactive portion, and we really need you to participate. Hopefully most of you have read it. I know some people is like, it's a big document, but what are your first impressions of the document as a whole? Anybody want to respond in chat, or you look, oh, okay. I'm not sure what your first name is, but Jay Wadsworth.
Hi, my name's Joe Aldworth. I'm the president of Capital Fire Mutual Aid.
Hi, Joe.
The document is extensive, I will give you that. It does lack some clarity as far as referencing FCC licensing. I think consulting those licenses that are already in state will tell you more about how many mobile radios, portable radios, receivers that each community is licensed for. That will give you a better overall impression of what you're going to be needing as far as the end all users. I found that was not accurate, just doing a guesstimation. I think when you're going to do a comparison graph of the smaller agencies, I think you need to also do a corresponding graph of the larger agencies and their volumes. That was on page 24.
Okay.
I think I did not see anything about existing infrastructure that was looked at versus proposed infrastructure. I think you do have some systems that are working and that are already existing versus Are you starting a whole new process? Are you looking to abandon those current sites or use them, or how would you integrate those in? And most of those sites are either leased or privately owned, and how would that be accomplished? I did not see that in there. So I saw a lot of references as far as, you know, building out with the state's infrastructure. I did not see anything about any private correlation on the dead spots with maybe Velcro or stuff like that. But I think that section's pretty weak, and maybe this is not this part of it. But I'll start off with that.
I appreciate that, Joe. Todd?
Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
We can.
Absolutely. Todd Poole, Ferrisburg Fire Department. I did read through the document. I want to thank everyone that's worked on it so far. It's quite impressive about the thoroughness of it and the attention to detail. So I want to thank everybody about all the work that's gone into that. I just wanted to comment with Joe mentioned issues about end users trying to get a number on the end users of firefighters, cops, EMS people in the state of Vermont is very challenging. Mm-hmm. You guys might, if for another reference for the amount of firefighters that are currently working on the volunteer and the career side, you might try and go to the Fire Academy. They might probably have the best idea about numbers, and even they'll admit their numbers are going to be rough. But that's all I've got for you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Todd and Joe. Anybody else have any comment on just initial first impression looking at the document?
So Bonnie, this is Scott. I'd like to respond to a couple of those. So
sure.
As far as the first comment goes about the FCC licenses across the state, the inventory document, we documented extensively all of the known FCC licenses across the state for VHF and UHF. So those are in the inventory document. And as Dom alluded to, that document is currently in the process of being reviewed for public release, so the sensitive information can be redacted. That FCC licensing information really doesn't tell us anything about the number of end user devices that are out there. Mobile radios, portable radios, consoles, consolettes. So we did make those estimates based on both comments to the best of our ability. Trying to get an exact inventory of the numbers out there is, like you said, is really, really difficult. We've done this many times at a county level, and it's difficult to even do that at a county level, trying to get much less trying to get a statewide estimate. So we did do the best we can on estimating the number of those devices that are out there. As far as reusing the existing infrastructure, yes. We pointed out in the document that the public safety standard for land mobile radio across the country is digital P25, and that's the recommended path we put for you to go down and get there. We included that there are a handful of P25 systems in the state that should remain in operation and ultimately could be integrated with a statewide build out. Certainly leveraging existing infrastructure and existing towers to the maximum extent is highly recommended. We did do some conceptual designs, but we did not do what would be called a detailed design, which would look at this tower would be in, this tower would be out for whatever reason, because that was beyond the scope of what we were asked to do. But we did do conceptual designs based on existing infrastructure and some other things where we would have to add towers that currently don't exist. So I hope that just addresses what you saw there on the land mobile radio side of things.
Right. Thanks, Scott. All right. Nobody has put anything in the comments. We're going to have a lot more opportunity here. So this kind of talks about the same thing, but then last was to kind of first impressions. And I know Joe and Todd, you kind of mentioned a few more detailed things. Is there anything in particular that y'all can point to that you liked about it, that you did not like about it? And I know, Joe, you already talked about some gaps that you felt that were in there, and Todd as well. Just trying to give people an opportunity here to just drill down from the broader perspective before we go into each individual section. Joe?
I think this is a long time in coming. I appreciate I appreciate the attempt here. I think it was well worth it. I think the information itself is invaluable, and I think it's a good step forward. And I have to applaud the task force and Mission Critical and Televate that it wasn't an easy job, and I want to acknowledge that.
Appreciate that, Joe. Drew?
Drew Hazelton, Chief of Rescue Inc., and I chair the EMS Advisory Committee. I noticed I couldn't find any real reference to modernizing the way that we dispatch EMS. So there's no reference to any sort of priority dispatching model, nurse triage in order to help reduce unnecessary EMS calls, or ways to siphon off calls to more appropriate services like 998. There seems to be a gap when it comes around to EMS dispatching.
All right, appreciate that, and thank you to have some of the suggestions or those references, the types of things you'd be looking for. Appreciate that. Last call on the larger, broader document before we go deeper into each section. William.
Hey, thank you. This is Will Moran. I'm the Director of Emergency Preparedness Response and Injury Prevention at the Health Department, and I oversee the Office of EMS. I'll just echo some of Drew's comments, but I think from an EMS perspective, while this is clearly a very comprehensive and well-done report, I think from the perspective of EMS and providing a vision for modern dispatching systems, the report is willfully inadequate in really providing a vision for what we should be moving towards, for what would just nearly even be comparable to our near peers. And I think there is a real opportunity to enhance the report by infusing into the report a vision for how we should be utilizing and managing some of our most precious pre-hospital resources across the state. You know, I searched the document for the word hospital, and it only shows up in the report once. And, you know, one of the conversations that we're having within the EMS Advisory Committee and as part of the broader conversation around healthcare reform is looking at how we are going to manage EMS resources in this renewed vision for how healthcare is going to be delivered in the state. That is absolutely a hot conversation right now, even amongst the Agency of Human Services and in the legislature. And I think if you're looking for a way to enhance this report, you've got to bring our hospital partners into this conversation, and the report should address how we need to be ensuring that hospitals are receiving timely response from EMS to ensure that we're moving patients within the system within reasonable amounts of time. So I think that certainly, I think broadly around EMS response and information management, the report is lacking a lot of detail. I think from the perspective of ensuring that our hospital system is supported by EMS in the way that works for all of us, that it is entirely absent from the report. And for something that is so important to, you know, if folks think back about the Oliver Wyman report that was released in October of 2024, EMS is amongst the core tenets of healthcare reforms, and ensuring that we can manage our transportation network is at the center of the vision for healthcare delivery in the state of Vermont in the future. And so again, happy to partner with you on this. I think it would benefit everyone if we could get that information into this report.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think interesting that you should say that just really quick so we can keep moving, is that those were some questions actually, like on response alternatives, alternative response, whichever way you want to use the two words. We did explore, and to your point, found that, you know, a lot of agencies aren't, you know, outside of, you know, protocols for emergency medical dispatch, which is part of the, you know, the call processing side that all the call takers at the PSAPs are trained in, thanks to the 911 side of the house. Then, you know, that part is there. Looking at those other response alternatives, like you were talking about, as far as that dispatch, who goes and make those efficient we just found that there was not a lot of that going on. And I guess to your point, maybe to speak to that a little bit more in the report. I think that's kind of like what Scott was alluding to as well, or was saying that certain things are out of scope. The hospital piece, and we can talk with the task force about it, may not, probably is not in scope, but again, from the dispatch and overall public safety communication system, where is that, what can we help support within this, but not also go outside of our scope.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that very much. Um, let's
Bonnie,
see.
Bonnie,
Yeah.
Bonnie,
Oh,
can I just ask two quick
yes, Paul.
follow-ups with
Yes,
Will? Will,
please do.
you meant two just clarifying things. You mentioned near peers. Are you referring geographically, like our neighboring states, when you say near peers?
Yeah, I mean, I think both about our near peers as far as regional partners in New England, but those of us that are fairly well tied into what's happening within the EMS industry across the country. What we're doing here in the state of Vermont, we are decades behind systems level management, behind information management, behind critical resource unit allocation. There are so many components to managing critical resources in a 21st century environment that I'm not sure the vision of this communication system includes that. And I think just one thing that concerns me is that if managing EMS resources in the way that we should be in alignment with our near peers, if that's not part of this vision, then what that says to me is that there will be a need to create a parallel system. And I think during a time where every dollar is vital to our success and it's difficult to come across dollars, we should be looking at maximizing our investment to include that this system serves every user who needs to utilize it. And I think in the near future, when the EMS Advisory Committee curates its report, without a doubt, the communication system as it exists today will continue to be, as it has been in past reports, highlighted to be in many ways willfully inadequate.
Okay, thank you. And the second real quick, you
Yeah.
referenced some report that was, I think you said, released in October, and I didn't catch the name of it.
Yeah, sure. So that I can't remember the specific act, but the it was the report was requested by the Green Mountain Care Board. It was required by statute, and the organization that drafted the report is the Oliver Wyman Group.
Okay.
If you go to the Green Mountain Care Board website, you should be able to find the report there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm happy to talk more offline if that would be helpful.
We have Act 167 was thrown into chat. All right,
Okay.
excellent. Thank you all. All right, so now let's kind of start, bringing things in more focused. If you've looked at the report, if you've read the report, you'll see there are three main sections and then several appendices. The first being the executive summary, then a methodology, and then really that core, the system design, future opportunities and considerations. You see here, the word recommendation. We really wanted to open this document up, and Dom said this earlier, as almost a menu of options. Understanding we want things to be practical and be able to be they'll each have maybe a place in time. Some of them may seem very, like, oh my gosh, we're never going to go there. That's, that's not what we want to do. But we presented the option and the information, the pros and the cons of things that could be possible given the right political will and environment and, state of things in the state of Vermont. We presented those with the options, the pros and the cons to help provide more informed decision making. And so that's nothing is set in stone. I think actually somebody pointed out yesterday, and this was great, that they read a line on referenced in section 3.4 physical consolidations, where we actually did use the recommended of an ideal state. That was very important. We need to take that back and we need to relook at this. So, or look at that language, because we want this to be viewed as a menu of options for decision makers to ultimately decide, where do they want to go? And do they want to start at option 1 and just leave it there? Or, they already want to go all the way over to an option 3 or an option 4, and then what's the plan to get there? It's more about what is possible. Rather than how it would be done. So just to kind of lay that groundwork. So we're going to talk and we're going to walk through each of these sections, starting with, once I can get my slide to advance, starting with similar questions that we just were saying. What do you like about it? What don't you like? What gaps are there in that section? How do you think we'd want to, we could fill them? Starting with the executive summary. We all know an executive summary is supposed to give that overview for the busy executives and busy anybody, to kind of give them the key components. So what feedback do you all have for us on the executive summary? Anything stood out? Anything you'd like to, say, well, I read this later on the report. It would have been great if this was up in the executive summary. I wouldn't have had to dig for it. What do you think? We've got 30, well, take away the task force and the consultants, probably got about 30 people on here. So I know y'all got some opinions. Y'all really like the executive summary. Okie doke. Well, we shall move on. Whoop. Yes, Paul.
I can't believe nobody's going to
I
speak up and
know.
say it's too long. Because it's too long. But
Yeah. Okay, let's see. We do have, okay, Laura, thank you. Okay, I just had to give a little bit more time. I shouldn't have rushed it. Laura's like, the infographics on page 1 is too small to easily read. Okay, let me, and this is the redacted version. So the same one you guys see on the website. So you're talking about this ecosystem graphic on the left is what I think you're referring to, Laura. If you could, yep, okay, thank you. We shall take that. Shorter, more bullets. There you go, Paul. Somebody else picked up on shorter and more bullets. Okay. Shorter, more. I think those are the only two. Okay, great. Appreciate that. It is a pretty lengthy summary. Normally we do like to see them only like, a couple pages, but there's a lot of information in there. All right, cool. Todd, yes.
Hi, yeah, I just had a quick question about a score that was redacted out of the executive summary, or our version of it on page 2. The model for advancing public safety score X out of 10 was redacted. I was curious why that was redacted.
Okay, and so one of the reasons I think at this point in member of the task force may be able to, and I can't even see it in here right now, in the executive summary. Okay. Oh, it's right there. I got you. Is because we are still in the draft, and we're still finalizing everything on the assessment side. So we want to make sure that that number, when we do publish it, that's the final number. Like when we take in everybody's information. So it would be premature.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. All right. So outside the executive summary, let's take a look now at the methodology. Now, what I will tell you already, one thing that we learned is that, again, because folks haven't not seen the assessment yet, there was a section in the methodology that talks about assumptions and how we got to certain numbers, where we had to kind of close some gaps. Some agencies just did not have the capability to provide certain information that we asked for. And so there's things that we had to modify. So one of the recommendations we'll definitely be taking a look at is how can we bring in that assumptive language, those assumption languages into this plan so that this plan can also, stand alone and not have to constantly refer back to the assessment. So other than that, anything in the methodology that you felt we were missing in there? Well, I don't know how they got to X. Todd, did you have another comment, or did you just still have your hand up? No. Okay. All right. This is usually when we don't have a lot of conversation around this section anyway. So let's start getting into the real meat here with section 3, the system design future opportunities and considerations. And we start there with organic and inorganic approaches to regionalization. So just a couple of seconds of context. When we talk about organic, well, let's start with inorganic. Starting with inorganic, we're talking about when the state mandates that certain things be done. It doesn't just have to be physical consolidation. It could be anything. Could be some sort of a policy or a procedure or different systems that you may have to use, something like that. Anything. When the state mandates that. An example in the state of Illinois is that they have, if you have a population of less than 25,000 in a county, you can only have 2 PSAPs, basically a primary and a backup. I believe, and Jackie can keep me honest on this one, in Minnesota, where she's from, there's only 1 PSAP per county, and those are run by the sheriff, right? And that is state mandated. Versus things like inorganic, or again, just kind of thinking that physical consolidation kind of discussion, is in Palm Beach County in Florida. They at one point had 24 PSAPs in their county, which is the largest county in Florida, granted, but at the same time, they have over time working together, working collaboratively, they've been able to reduce that now to 13, and there's still probably more reductions coming over time, but that's taken a really long time to get there, and I'm talking like 10, 15 years over time. But that's an organic kind of approach, and that's what we were trying to kind of give that picture of those two. So any thoughts around that? That section, organic and inorganic approaches to regionalization. Oh. Any thoughts on that? Did that message come across with the differences that we were trying to associate or explain? Nope, none. I see Laura had a question about population in reference to the appendix. So yeah, we'll chat about that there. Okay. No feedback? Okay. All right, let's talk then about section 3.2. Now, this, when we talk about... Oh, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, you're going to address it in the other sections. I'll wait till then. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're fine. Appreciate it. Did I see somebody else had their hand up, or is it just Joe? I thought I saw somebody else, perhaps.
No, it's just Joe.
Okay. All right, so section 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, you'll see a tier reference in parentheses after each. So when we talk about regionalization, we look at it from a 3-tier perspective. A lot of people always think it's all about physical consolidation, and it's not. You'll see tier 3, policy and operations based. That's what we're talking about. That's kind of like the broadest kind of approach to be able to, whether it's, we heard a lot in the earlier town halls about standardization of like what information is provided or how it's provided when a call is, a telephone call is transferred from the PSAP to a dispatch center. And things like that, how that information, like that would be an example of a policy or operations based, something that could be a lot broader, that could be applied, using some sort of training, statewide training, and, and work on those kind of things. Tier 2, which you'll see is technology and shared services, that's more regionalized. It starts becoming a lot, it can be broad. It could be a state thing. I mean, there's the use of Valcor right now, which is state. But it tends to be a little bit more structured and a little bit more complicated. And then tier 1 is when we really talk about actual physical consolidation. And again, that's going to be even more focused, more regionalized. So we start with the broadest, tier 3, operations and policy-based regionalization. I am going to throw up this page. I'm not sure what page number. Excuse me. I don't mean to make anybody dizzy, but this diagram right here, because this is broken down into, when we talk about policy and operations based support, operations, and workforce, it really falls into this umbrella. Any comments, thoughts about what you liked, didn't like, any gaps and suggestions for closing those gaps in this section? And sometimes is the least controversial, but sometimes one of the hardest ones to achieve. Yes, Joe.
Under the workforce section, I see recruiting and hiring, but it doesn't say anything about retention.
Okay. That's okay. Now, good point. Good point. We'll take a look at that. Drew?
Where does the impact on the end user come into this?
Who are we talking about? Constituents? We're talking about field responders. When you say end users, I mean, still even you could talk about telecommunicators. I mean, dispatchers. Where?
So I'm thinking mostly from the responders' perspective. With 37 different dispatch centers around the state, there are, there are things, there are positives and negatives that come from, crossing over make-believe boundaries. There's, telecommunication dead zones and operability. But so when we talk about regionalization, is there a place in that where it has an impact on the people that are out in the field doing the work? Well,
Right. I'm going to kind of scroll back up at least right now into the executive summary just for a second, because I think what we're talking about here is some of the things that you'll find in, sorry about this, in this table right here. And how, and again, we'll review this table, but how those things kind of go downstream, where it's talking about, quicker response times, lack of, not having to transfer calls and those delays, so those response times can be better. Having that consistency in the training and the way information may be provided and stuff like that. If you're talking about from the radio perspective, can let Scott talk to that. But looking, of course, try to eliminate dead spots, improve consistency of communications, reliability, sustainability of systems. So those types of things. I think everything that we've talked about here, we do keep those the end users in mind, from the dispatch staff all the way out to the field. If it's not clearly expressed, that's something that we should look at. I think this kind of goes back to Drew, what maybe Todd was saying about the EMS side in response alternatives, when maybe it is more appropriate for something else to respond rather than police, fire, or EMS as well. And looking at those alternatives. And Joe?
I think, and I don't want to put words into Drew's mouth, but I think it's the end user. And on page 67, section 3314 or something like that, you say it's about mobile radio, 90% mobile radio. When firefighters and EMS folks are at the bedside or inside a house, they don't have a mobile radio on them. They have a portable radio. And so I think that's important. That's a safety issue, especially in today's age, trying to deal with the mental health and the drug situation, is having that ability to communicate. They don't always have the option to run out to their truck to jump onto the mobile radio. I don't know if that's what Drew is heading to, but that was one of the things that I noticed, that we're not tied to our mobile radios. So, and that goes with the law enforcement too.
Right.
They can't run back to their cruiser.
So, yeah, if I could just address that, you're 100% correct. And we certainly acknowledge and recognize that. To the question about the end user, so, I think what the ultimate objective here is to improve the overall communications environment for everybody, from the time the call is taken to how that call is dispatched to the first responders in the field, and how the first responders receive that call and are able to communicate with each other, and also back and forth to dispatch. Your point about the coverage levels, yes, as we put in the report, kind of the national standard for public safety has been, you want to achieve 95% coverage of your radio network across whatever area you're trying to cover. In this case, what we're looking at is the state as a whole. Now, what level of coverage you get to is dependent on the decision makers and what their desire is and what they can afford. The deeper level of coverage you get, the costs increase significantly. Statewide bases, most of the states in the country that have a statewide radio network, there are a few exceptions. I know Massachusetts to the south and Rhode Island are two exceptions, but most of those states build to a mobile portable coverage, or excuse me, a mobile coverage standard, because they're covering such a large footprint. To get any more granular really drives up the cost, not only the initial cost, but the ongoing maintenance. You can augment that mobile coverage with things such as vehicular repeaters that are able to turn your car radio into a repeater for your portable radio that's out there. But your point is well taken. We fully acknowledge that all three disciplines, law enforcement, EMS, and fire, and probably fire and EMS in particular, really depend on those portable radios when they're on scene doing their things.
And I'd just add to that really quick before Michael, we go to you, is for those that don't know, all of us, Scott, myself, Jack, I mean, we've all been in the industry, whether it be, Scott's former law enforcement out of, Pennsylvania State, or state of Pennsylvania, patrol. We've been under the headset. We've been in dispatch. We are all even current. Jason actually is still a current volunteer firefighter, or EMS. Sorry, Jason. So we are aware of those, and we do take that take it seriously into consideration when we talk about this. Michael.
Hi, Michael Ranzio, Chief for Chester Ambulance. Kind of to add to the end user conversation, I see Valcor being brought up a lot, and I know personally having kind of a mobile MDC that's accessible in an ambulance can be pretty useful. I just have a lot of concerns with Valcor because I am a user of Valcor as well, and if that is kind of the system that's going to be implemented throughout the state, that raises a lot of concerns for me. I think that's a terrible system, and it does not function well at all. Most of the neighboring law enforcement agencies want to get away from Valcor. So I think there is a very big direct impact to the end users when we're talking about a regionalized or a standard CAD system for the whole state.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. And that's actually the next tier. So you're going to be right into that conversation. Bradford Fire, who's representing from there?
Hi, my name's Ryan Terrell. I'm the fire chief in Bradford. So we're currently dispatched through Hanover Dispatch, which has done an extensive simulcast system. And talking about the end user conversation, I mean, we have very good portable radio coverage now. And with some of the discussion, I mean, our if the infrastructure we have in place now and everything that is provided to us, like for instance, we have I think it's CSI is what we're using for our CAD system, and all our reporting is done online through that. Are we going to have to transition to this system no matter what, or if what we're using is a better system than what the state's going to provide? I mean, I guess I'm looking for clarification on that.
Yeah, there's again, and thank you for that. There, nothing in this is set in stone. It is about options and about, you know, what could be possible, what we've seen successful as other places, but then also very specifically customized to the current environment and potential future environment in Vermont. So it's about what and then how those things could actually be accomplished would require a lot more further exploration.
So if I can just take that,
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
so the objective is nobody, nobody wants to force anybody to take a step backward in any way, shape, or form. From your radio system coverage, if you have a good simulcast system right now that you're using and you're happy with it, the process from our recommendation standpoint would be is if the state moves forward and builds out this regional zone simulcast system across the state, that you just keep using yours, and then at some point, if practical, just integrate that with the overall system. You would maintain your same coverage or perhaps even improve it, but it could just be integrated into the overall system, which would provide benefits for interoperability and other things. But I don't think anybody is going to look to anybody and expect them to take a step backwards.
And Bonnie, just to add one piece to that, and I know we're not to the technology piece of it quite yet.
Yeah,
but okay, so to as specific to the Valcor issue, if you look specifically at those options, for example, one of the options does talk about CAD to CAD functionality and exchange of data. So as Scott pointed out, there's no inference, there's no recommendation for anyone to take a step back, and we certainly do not want to portray that as such. So if you have a system, specifically a CAD system in this instance, that is not the Valcor system, and you feel that your system is vastly superior, then certainly a CAD to CAD option, that option 2, as you see on the screen, would be a good option to proceed with. That way you are still sharing information with your near peers as far as your surrounding agencies. And then there is also the option later in the section about the potential all the way up through, should the state desire, the ability to complete a request for proposals process to see if there is a better solution on the market. What's the cost of that? Is it cost prohibitive? Is it cost beneficial, et cetera, et cetera? And there would be no requirement, not at least not as we have here in the document, for you to join that system. However, on the flip side of that, if the state were to complete an RFP process for a new CAD system and you feel that it is beneficial for you to switch, that option as well would be there. So there's no desire for anyone to have to take a step backwards.
And just to summarize all that is one of the key things in Act 78 too. And I know that the task force we've got, if it's not broken, right? We really don't want to look. We want to enhance, not detract, and that is the whole goal of this. Barb.
I just wanted to add that this kind of goes to what I was saying at the beginning, that we don't have a preconceived notion of how this is going to come out, and this is a perfect example of why everyone's feedback and input is so critical, so that we know all of these things that are important to each of you. So I appreciate all the feedback, and we'll take that all into consideration as the conversation moves forward.
Great, thanks, Barb. All right, well, we kind of moved forward here, so let's talk. Is there any more discussion around the different technology piece? Is there? Can you play to how? Can we explain how the CAD to CAD system works? Jason, do you want to take a?
Yep. So in very general, non-technical terms, essentially there would be an interface, so sort of like a separate software program, and in some systems it is built into the CAD system, kind of like a translation software. So it enables one system in jurisdiction A to talk with a different system at jurisdiction B. And that exchange of information, for example, if jurisdiction A has a structure fire and they require a fire engine and an ambulance from jurisdiction B to assist on that fire, that information could cross over from one system to the other. And potentially, depending on how jurisdiction B has things set up, a call for service could automatically be created with all the appropriate information from jurisdiction A that then populates on the dispatcher's screen. And what that does, it eliminates that phone call and saves vast amount of time, but from one dispatcher having to call multiple other jurisdictions. We heard some instances where structure fires may require a dispatch center to make upwards of 5 to 6 additional phone calls after they've dispatched their own agencies to be able to receive the appropriate amount of assistance for that incident. So a CAD to CAD interface would allow that information to go out automatically and those other agencies to go ahead and dispatch right away versus the additional time it would take to make those phone calls.
Additionally on that, what that would also do is, I think maybe Jason, you said this about elimination of call transfers or reduction in call transfers, because the and outside of exceptions where different occurrences, the dispatcher or the the dispatcher / call taker at a PSAP could essentially take and enter that information, and it would then populate at the appropriate dispatch center, and they could just then dispatch the call. So that could actually reduce call transfer time. If anybody saw some of the stats in call transfers, it may just take a second to hit that button and technology-wise transfer that call. But with all the conversation nationally, that's about 90 seconds is what we find per call transfer. And then when we look at your call volume, 242,000 calls, and look at the number of transfers, which was about 72,000 of those calls are transferred, 33%. When you multiply that by 90 seconds and then do all the, you're looking at, I think it was 1,900 hours of call transfer time that could be eliminated with something such as a CAD to CAD solution. So, Todd.
Yes, I just wanted to jump on Jason's notes there, and all those benefits that he listed are happening right now between Burlington and South Burlington, with a CAD to CAD system that talks to two dispatch centers, and a call is taken and a button is pushed for mutual aid, and all the resources are pre-programmed in that for that dispatcher to push those out. That system is around, it's working, the benefits are there. This is not Valcor. Valcor is used in tandem with that system, but that is in the state now, and I look forward to hopefully that happens around the state for everyone, because it is a great thing.
Good. Thank you, Todd. I appreciate the actual lived experience perspective and sharing that. And we are right there with you. We think CAD to CAD could be very, very helpful in this situation, have a really significant impact. All right. Any other comments on the technology and shared systems based content of the report, that section? All right. Let's move on to then the physical facilities based section here. And again, just recalling and remembering these are several, different options. It's not saying all the way to option 4. Even our goal on this and the recommendation when you look at, see if I can get the document back up here. When you look back at the document and go all the way down, sorry for the, because this is PDF, it's a little bit harder to navigate, but I'm trying to get down to, oh, no, it's actually up in the executive summary. I can show you. When you look at this diagram right here, you can see when it comes to regionalization, it is talking about a reduction of regional dispatch centers in alignment with PSAPs under non-law enforcement authority, but it's a reduction. That's the overarching recommendation. To what level or degree that would happen, that's what the options are laying out with the benefits, kind of that approach. So the overarching recommendation is to reduce the number. Then within the options for the decision makers to determine on that plane of options, how far would they want to take it? And it again, it may not be feasible or desired right now, but the future, who knows? So any thoughts? I'm sure there's comments or thoughts about this section. I'm trying to get back to that page, top of the options, this one. We did recognize too, I will say while people are commenting, the University of Vermont and Mad River Valley we did not suggest that they be involved as part of that reduction because they are both very unique environments. And then, but at the same time, when you look at any of these, anybody who does not participate in a regionalization, that would still be subject to whatever other standards, requirements may come about, right? If they want to be standalone and not participate. So there's that kind of, I don't want to say opt out option, but it does also indicate we do encourage that there would still be, okay, well, you need to participate in CAD to CAD or, things like that, if that were to be, something. So, and if you're wondering what these 8s and 9s are, that is down in one of the appendices, which is a document that provided, where if I can get there, oh, come on. This here is a graphical layout of how each of the PSAPs and dispatch centers kind of not rated, but how they met certain or did not meet certain industry standards and best practices that we have found very helpful around the country. So I'm going to pause, stop talking, and is there any comments? Any hands raised? Nope. This is usually the most controversial part. Well, how do people feel about physical consolidation in alignment with some of these other things that we've been talking about? Does it even have a place? Todd?
Yeah, I'll say this again as a first responder. It doesn't matter to me where a dispatch comes from. I'm in the northern part of the state. If I get my information through that radio, through the speakers in the ceiling, that I need to go to X location for Y problem, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
You know, I'm not cut up on you know, the local argument that we need to have local control to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Michael?
Just looking for some clarification. So is one of the options to reduce the amount of PSAPs that we currently have?
Reduce the amount of regional dispatch centers, not the number of PSAPs.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Deputy Chief Aldsworth. Chief Aldsworth, you're on mute. Berry City. There you are. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Joe.
Okay. So, question on I'm not against reducing the number of dispatch centers. I think that's important. My fear is if you look at the numbers, you're creating mega dispatch centers for large areas. And if you look at the number of incidents handled, I think there are times when the system gets overloaded or high utilization, and I think you're setting those dispatch centers up to be overwhelmed, and there's no redundancy to take over that backlog. Where if you don't have such a large mega center and that maybe scale back a little bit to be more realistic, it allows the state to grow. Right now, this plan doesn't show future state growth, which everybody's trying to do more housing and get more people in here and everything else. If we do end up having to grow, are we limiting ourselves on that aspect?
Sorry, I muted myself there. There are very clearly actually defined definitions of micro, small, medium, large, and mega centers. And these would still, for the most part, be considered either small or medium rather than large. With the, yeah, even with the exception, yeah, they would be considered that small, medium, not even into that large. And that is, I'm glad you did mention that when we looked at calls and incidents, it looks like a lot when you say, oh, you're going to take on 14,000 more calls or, you know, 30,000 more incidents. But when you divide that too by hours, which is 8,000 and some hours in a year, yeah, it does break that down smaller. Now, what I will say would, and somebody mentioned this in an earlier session, what we, again, because not everybody could give us their incident volume and their call volume, a 10-digit volume and stuff like that, we had to make some assumptions. But where we couldn't get to yet because of that yet was the busy time. What's your, you know, the kind of the hours of the day, right? We know the day shift or evening shift, the weekends, the days, they have different call volumes, right? And so to get down to that granular level, we have to be able to access additional data to really refine that. So yes, acknowledging these are more rough order of magnitude type of numbers that we were trying to get to at this point. Benchmarks. The benchmarks, Martha. So again, things that we saw across the country. Am I still on that page? Let me see if I'm still on that page. I am. All right, so one of the big ones is 24/7 operations. Then we looked at population, and you heard me earlier talk about like in the state of Illinois, where 25,000 population, and they were required. So we looked at industry. What are other agencies doing when it comes to looking at things like physical consolidation? We went these ones when we did the report, or not report, the questionnaire. We did broke it down to the increments, and the one benchmark ended up being 30,000. So we did 30,000 and 50,000 here instead of the what we would normally do would be 25,000 and 50,000. And then we went with statewide incident volume, and because we had pretty good numbers there, we looked at it like less than or equal to 1% of the full incident volume, or the 3%. In other situations, we would use typically in another scenario, but it doesn't pertain here, is 911 call volume for a full region. But again, we have dispatch centers and we have PSAPs, and we were talking about the dispatch centers. So we looked at it by incident volume. Average cost per variable, our national says that kind of a benchmark of where it's kind of like, oh, more than usually it's in the 20s, and I would say probably $17 to $25 and per call. When we start getting into greater than 40 or greater than 30, so that's our benchmark there, that we're like, what efficiencies could we find? Primary workstations, things like NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, right? Start talking about and even APCO, NINA having two be able to have two dispatchers on duty. And so workstations, you're looking at least primary of two of them. We're not talking about backup consoles, training consoles, but indicating if you have two primary workstations, you probably have two people on duty, but that doesn't mean that that's your minimum staffing per shift. So again, looking at having less than two people is a challenge, because you want to make sure that, especially if you have that unexpected, unfortunate mass casualty incident, an active shooter, things like that, when you only have one person on duty. We already talked about the advantages of CAD to CAD and all the phone calls that sometimes have to be made. And we know that there's been those types of incidents. That's that one. Retention, we also look at staffing. We talked about that and the importance of that retention. We reference it here, but we don't have to look back and see exactly how we talk about it up above. We know nationally, looking at a greater than or equal to 80% retention is very positive. Most places are usually in the 50s and 60s, unfortunately. So we look at that as a 75-80 benchmarks. Outbound transfers, now this is, again, we want to eliminate transfers in greater than or equal to 25%. We want that. Now, I will tell you, there is legislation that just came out in Utah in March of last year that they are state mandated. Here we go with the state inorganic again, state mandating that any PSAP cannot transfer outbound more than 2% of their calls that they receive on 911. So 25% is kind of around like the benchmark that we're working with for the rest of the country. Inbound, it's the opposite direction. Again, this is more because a lot of fire EMS get inbound, so we look at the other side of the 25% at the 75. And then the EMD, EPD, EFD, the protocols, in case here, most of them are transferred because they're provided at the PSAP. Direct application, again, trying to eliminate the need for call transfer to give that zero response time, especially on EMD. That's our benchmark. And then our admin call volume, especially with smaller PSAPs. Again, we find that a lot of times they're more of an administrative. They're supporting the police departments, just daily administrative call. They're also doing switchboard and 911. So we want to, one of our benchmarks relates to making sure that the agencies are actually focusing, or the majority of the work is on 911. So that's that benchmark. And then we tally those up, and that's where you see these 9s and 8s and 7s. Whew, I haven't had to explain that one for a while, so appreciate that, that run through. Joe.
Is the population reflect community or the population served?
I'm sorry, that cut out for me. Does it reflect the community or what?
Or the population actually served of all the towns that dispatch for?
This was this question, the response, and you can see the ranges was asked in the report, in the questionnaire that was distributed. So this is self-reported that then, and I'm going to say to include everything that they dispatched for.
Okay. I find a couple of them that are maybe off, so you know.
Okay. We did send back each in the inventory when that gets published, every one of these agencies, dispatch centers or PSAPs they received a copy of their blueprint and their inventory and were asked to validate the information.
Okay.
Okay. I think Barry's popular. Oh, okay. We have Laura. You think that Barry's may be incorrect? And this is another reason why, some of this isn't, we got to get these numbers right. They need to match across. So if there's something internal that you can, where's Barry? Barry, 5,000 to 10,000 was the number here. So if you guys need to follow up on that on your end and can provide the documentation update, that would be great. Yes, Joe, again?
Just the other thing, I think the capital fire on the Montpelier may be off too, but I'll get with Carrie about that.
Yeah. Okay. And then Hartford, Martha, you think Hartford could have a couple of issues? Okay. Like I said, this information was validated by whoever the contact was that looked at this information. Scott, welcome to the conversation. Scott, you're muted.
Hi, sorry about that. Hi, Scott Smith from Hartford. On page 97, where you have the figures.
97, let's pop, whoop, yep, let's go there. This one?
Oh, up one.
Nope, 97.
But below the map. Yep.
This one?
Yep.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As I indicated on our inventory, we had room to go up one more position. And we have 3 positions. We man a second one when we can. I mean, the third one when we can to cover the high call volume hours. And the numbers that you show us having additional agencies added to us is unrealistic. We don't have the room. I mean, you show Westminster currently has 52 agencies they dispatch for, and when they get busy, they don't answer 911 calls. And now you got them going up to 112 agencies, as well as answering 911 calls. And I just don't think this is realistic. I mean, we don't have room for 6 positions like Westminster does now. So I don't know where you got those numbers.
Jason, do you want to speak to that real quick? Because I do want to get moving forward here, but this is great conversation. I don't want to let it go either.
Sure. So the added volume comes from the reported volume from the various dispatch centers that would be regionalized, including the out-of-state numbers. And this was based on the information from the inventory for those specific agencies. We went through and hand-picked those numbers, so it wasn't some kind of like a spreadsheet or automated process to make sure that we had that volume correct. So that added the 911 call volume and the added incident volume correlates directly to the field agencies that would be brought in. And as Bonnie said, when you break that out, that's approximately 2 additional incidents per hour. Yes, it does say 76 agencies, but what we've seen happen in other parts of the country is a little bit of realignment of workstation positions, for example. So hypothetically, if you have 1 workstation position today that dispatches fire and EMS, that could potentially become 2 positions, split the departments to give approximately an even distribution of incidents between those 2 And that's, while it does look like a lot of additional agencies, some of those agencies are, 150, 200 calls a year. So when you look at it from a per agency standpoint and that approximate 2 per hour, we didn't feel that, it would require a drastic increase in the number of workstation positions.
Some information that's missing is what your recommended number of dispatchers that would need to be handling all those other agencies.
And that's information that's included in the inventory that the state is still working on specific redactions for. So that will be coming out, as Dom said at the beginning, hopefully next week.
Okay.
Okay.
Going
You
up,
talked about
going up to.
go ahead. No,
No,
go
I
ahead.
was
Well,
just-
actually, can I say one thing, Scott? I want to address Martha
Absolutely.
really quick. This is what you're absolutely right, Martha, that because we don't have that. So this was a very high, there's a high level breakdown just to show how many maybe calls per hour overall. And yes, we understand it doesn't reflect an increase, at the busiest hours of busiest times for each of these agencies at this point. We acknowledge that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
No, it's true.
And
Martha's right. And
Yep.
currently, when we have 3 consoles manned, there are times when all 3 consoles are overwhelmed and we have to call in like a detective to come in and help answer phones. So I'm just saying, adding all these other agencies on, unknown what type of call volume they have throughout the day and evening, it's just hard to fathom that working for us.
Yeah, I understand.
And
you.
on the map portion of it, I
Uh-huh.
know we talked about the countywide dispatching was talked about, and
Yep.
Martha brought that up as well as Ben.
Mm-hmm.
You guys indicated that you went that route because there was no countywide governments. However, there are countywide.
One of the things.
There are countywide courts. And these
Mm-hmm.
courts negatively affect each dispatch center who has to enter all their warrants in and vows,
Okay.
restraining orders and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that up again, and that's something that we did talk about post after the others, right? Adding a different couple of, for A, B, C, including what would it look like from a countywide breakdown, and adding a couple more options in there of that breakdown. So I appreciate you bringing that up again. Michael?
The appendix B, the one we were just looking at.
Uh-huh.
Does that include all dispatch centers in the state?
Yep. There's 37
Okay.
entries here.
But it doesn't include Bells Falls PD dispatch or Rutland City Regional Ambulance dispatch.
This includes everyone we've talked to. Barb,
Bells Falls PD has 1 full-time and a part-time dispatcher that dispatches during daytime hours, and Rutland Regional Ambulance, when they can, dispatch themselves as well.
So we have Rutland City.
Rutland Regional
Ambulance. He's referring to Rutland Regional, and actually what we found, they are not that's not considered a dispatch system. Their dispatch still comes from Westminster. Westminster is making a phone call to the agency versus dispatching them using traditional fire station alerting, for example, the tone and voice type dispatching. And even when we went on site, because I was actually one of the folks that was on site at that location, when we got there, they actually said, "We don't know why you're here because we are not a dispatch center."
And Jason,
so that is why they're not included.
And then we have a comment from Martha saying that is not true. We transfer calls to regional ambulance. When they're unavailable, it goes to Westminster. Now, let me just pause here really quick because it's there. There's only 5 minutes left officially of this, but we can, anybody that can continue because we really still have more to get to. This is great because we haven't spent some time on these pieces. So I'm going to just pause it. We're good to stay on, but I know some people may have to go. Michael, or did we finish up, Jason? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yes.
Okay. Michael, did you have something?
No, the last thing I was going to add is that map that we were looking at and us being dispatched by VSP Westminster. I think something is to also add into all of this is just the quality of service you're being provided. Hartford Dispatch does a fantastic job of dispatching, but I've heard so many horror stories from Westminster Dispatch of missing information and just all kinds of things. And is there any part of this where there is kind of a benchmark set for what that quality should look like? I mean, I would venture to say that I would pay double to stay with Hartford Dispatch than go to VSP Dispatch.
Understood. And that I think speaks to what we talked about in that tier 3, that section 3.2, that policy and operations based, about getting those standardized, things in place so that it elevates not only, VSP, but all of the dispatch centers, all of the PSAPs, and you can elevate those services through through policy and operations based efforts as well.
Okay. I just feel like we've been trying to do that with VSP for a long time with no success. But that's just my.
Appreciate it. Joe?
Who would run the dispatch centers? I know right now, I mean, Lamoille County is the sheriff's department, Hartford PD, VSP. Everybody, you're throwing out a bunch of different names here, but who would overall oversee the dispatching centers, and where would the dispatching centers work for? Would it be state employees? Would they still stay autonomous to those locations? I mean, that's not answered.
Yeah, what we proposed here very early in one of the options was that it would be not necessarily independent, but some form of organization, whether that be under DPS or something that was solely focused on, it could be a state entity focused on public safety communications rather than under police, under, law enforcement, fire, or EMS, and that they would run it. Now, at the same time, because we're not suggesting any of the existing, leverage the existing infrastructure or the existing PSAPs, that perhaps an option or, is that even though they would have that coordinated oversight, there's a whole bunch of this in the governance about making sure that there's regional representation or regional, groups that are feeding information and oversight and stuff like that up to the state, but that, these PSAPs could still be housed within their existing locations, even though they may be a municipal location, and some sort of MOU or agreement would have to be in place for that to be able to happen. We don't want to abandon any of the infrastructure in that regard. Does that answer your question, Joe?
Thank you.
All right, cool. All right, let's hop back into the PowerPoint here. We did physical. We were just talking about a little bit of the governance and oversight. Again, we were looking at a variety of different options. Jackie has a lot of experience on our team. She actually was state 911 director in Minnesota. She does a lot of our state level work, and presented several options and ideas on how that could be able to make sure too that the local voice is still there, right? For those that are concerned about local control. Any thoughts on the governance section? Hey, all right, Scott, we see your comment about it's scaring you. To think that the state would take complete control of the PSAPs. There's specific reason?
Well, I think most everybody knows in the past that they closed two very necessary PSAPs in Rutland and Derby,
Mm-hmm.
as well as switching from a proven CAD system to a police RMS system.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
it's scary what they would do
Okay.
or not do.
Right. Appreciate that.
And
Joe? Oh, sorry, Scott. Keep going.
I was just going to throw in the fact that, you know, the state's retirement system is quite different from our
Mm-hmm.
town of Hartford retirement system. So
Yeah, I hear you. Joe?
Just to follow up on Scott's
Oh,
comment.
Paul? Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
just bear in mind when the report refers to quote unquote the state, that doesn't necessarily mean state police dispatch as we currently know it. It could be some other entity within state government.
understood. Thank you, Joe.
I think that's a good thing to highlight. We'll need to highlight, Paul, maybe a little bit more clarity around that. Joe?
As far as the governance, I understand that what you're trying to get to. But when it comes down to actual contracting and negotiating the end all fees, I didn't see much of you didn't allude much to that end of that. And I know that they're pursuing whether it's cost-based tax or whatever. There's a lot still to be determined, but I did not even see alluding to that. How is that going to be addressed as far as negotiating a contract and that type of stuff?
Right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Again, the options there are going to have to be, you know, what would that look like will have to be worked out and explored. All right, let's go to funding and cost sharing. Again, as Dom said, you know, we do have the funding workshop still to take place. That's going to be taking place next week with some legislative folks, and we're going to be able to dig in a little bit more on what some of that could look like. But any initial comments? Scott?
I think y'all need to look into the funding, what funding you're going to be removing if they force the New Hampshire agencies to go to a Vermont agency, how that's going to affect those dispatch centers in New Hampshire.
Yeah, that was actually, there was a lot of good conversation around that yesterday. So we heard a lot about that. Okay, specific reason, look at the state. Okay, thank you, Doug, for that comment as well. Anything else with funding and cost sharing? Oh, Joe, was that you?
Yeah, just one last thing is that I understand that you're trying to see what the true cost, but down the road, replacing the infrastructure, upgrading of technologies, I did not see any plan per se, and that I think that's huge. I mean, we're into this right now. We had to go through a capital plan here, and so I don't see any of that, strategic planning associated.
Okay, good point. I think that would be one thing that would come out of as the discussions about this and some of the options are explored and, you know, which direction they want to go, then that would actually probably build out the strategic plan for something like this. All right, any other thoughts on funding and cost sharing at the moment? How can you do it when you don't have? Right, initially things are going to start out, Martha, as definitely as ROM costs, and we've got some of those things. I know Scott did a really, they've done quite a good job on developing on what the ROM costs for different radio options would be. We have some information put together on, you know, like CAD to CAD all the way through, you know, replacement. through an RFP type of process. We've got some governance numbers and things like that that we're preparing as well, that ultimately those things will be put in here. But there is a page in that section that does talk about those things that need to be considered in the funding element and the cost sharing, some of those one-time recurring, OpEx, CapEx, all that kind of stuff. Thank you for that question, Martha. Nicole?
Unless I'm missing it on the funding, does that also include funding for, if this ever occurs and you got all these agencies that would not necessarily be forced to leave their great dispatch centers that they're at now to be all in the state? Does that also include like getting everyone in departments, fire, EMS, all on the same radios and portables and mobiles? Is that funding including in that, or is that something separate, or am I missing it? Because this is a huge document to read in a week before this.
Understood. Scott, did you want to discuss that? I mean, my initial response to that is that, yeah, all of that needs to be taken into consideration, how that would be funded. But Scott, did you have a response? Or did we lose Scott?
Had a hard stop at 125.
Oh, okay. My apologies. But that would be, that the goal would be that, how do these things get funded, right? In its entirety. And that is one of the cost considerations. All right. Let me just double check. Is there anything else in chat? We all need to understand. Okay, so Todd, we all need to understand this report is the first draft, and this is a broad strokes view, if you will. Yes, you are correct. Thank you for that. All right, timeline. Important to know in the timeline section, we're from 1 year to 10 years. This is, again, nothing that would happen overnight. And why that's important is because just think if the state, if the decision makers, I don't want to keep saying the state, but if decisions say, hey, we are going to look at standardization of some policies and procedures, some policy type of things, right? And we're going to go ahead and we want to explore CAD to CAD. Just those two things, some of that could be done in a couple of years. CAD to CAD could take a little bit longer in a phase type, procurement, all this kind of things, right? What would that look like? But that could have such a significant impact when you cascade that. Well, maybe when it comes to anything on that, in that physical tier 1, oh, maybe that's something then they want, they put off, maybe with a few exceptions, like maybe the sensors that aren't 24/7. The timeline is very fluid, and it has to be agile, because we know this profession has just evolved, right? So many times technology, all of these things. I think to Todd's comment, I think it was Todd earlier, talked about all the things that are happening with, not even police and fire and them even having to go to calls. There's other options. We really need to take all that into account. So this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow, or maybe even 2-3 years down the road. And there's a lot of things that can take, 10 years plus to do that. The appendices, I think we actually hit a lot on the appendices, especially in that appendix B, which is great. And then other things are just supporting, the document. So if there is nothing there,
Laura had previously asked how we got to the population figures in the appendices.
Oh. Yeah, Laura, can you give me a thumbs up or a comment? Did we address that when we went through Appendix B? Those were self-reported. Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, thanks for going back around to that. I'm going to skip over this one because this, I think, is the last one. And if you, and I didn't prep you guys for this on this, I'm so sorry. But if you were in any of other town halls or community sessions, I like, because we've had a lot of people talking, and that is fantastic. This was a great session, but I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share something. And yes, I'm going to force it a little bit here. If you can't speak because you don't have a mic or you're on the floor, You got background, please type it into chat when we call on you, but we are going to go around the room and I'm going to ask, what suggestion do you have for the task force to improve the system design plan document? And I'm going to start at the top with Bradford Fire. If you could come off mute, and what suggestions do you have to improve the document?
Specifically to the document, I'm not sure that I have any specific suggestions.
Okay.
As I spoke earlier, like, you know, we're with our current dispatch center, we have a good setup. And they have backup redundancy in place so that if they're overwhelmed, our other dispatch center can take over their calls to continue the same flow. Does this document have in it as far as redundancies so that if one of these 6 dispatch centers you're talking about going down to, where, you know, one in the southern state could help out one in the northern state if there's a huge demand for call volume up there.
Right. And I think that's the beauty of some of this standardization of policies and procedures and
I
operations.
mean, I think if they were all on the same CAD system across the state, that would be a big improvement to be able to do stuff like that.
Right, and that's kind of that, exactly. So when we talk about regionalization, those standardizations starting at the policy and operations level or the policy level and supported by the technology and shared services regionally, those are the things that really help amplify, you know, the return on investment of some of these, where you can have that rollover. You know that the folks at another dispatch center are operating under the same training, experience, expertise, you know, same operational environment as the one that you're currently working in. And if you couldn't go to your center for whatever reason, let's say there's an outage or maybe there's a storm, perhaps you could go to another center knowing that you would still have access to all your information, be able to communicate. So all that redundancy and resiliency is something we definitely look at.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Carrie McCool. I like your last name. What could we do, Carrie, to make this a better document? Oh, okay. You're going to type in chat. Thank you, Carrie. We'll wait for. Well, while you do that, we'll go on to our next person, which is, and well, Jason, I'm going to actually toss this over to you because you have a better sense. We talked last time about if you'd already been on a previous session, we want to make sure we have the new folks. So you have a better sense of who was on the other sessions, I think, than I do, since I was remote yesterday.
Okay. Let's see. Craig Bowden.
Greg, could you come off mute and share your thoughts? Or oh, where did Craig go? Did we lose Craig? Oh no, he's right there. Craig, can you come off mute? Are you able to? Okay. Let's move on, Jason.
Okay. Deputy Chief Aldsworth.
I want to say thank you guys. I just have a couple of things. You might want to look into what type of network on the simulcast regional you're going to propose, either microwave, E-line, or fiber. And just to know that there's a discrepancy in the fiber costs across the state. So that is something that is really needs to be looked at. Second of all, maybe when you break down of costs of the overall system, a cost per capita per person in the state might be helpful to the when you're doing a governance and a cost allocation with the legislature for each of your proposals. And then something I did notice, it alluded to a couple of times, but second channels on that simulcast networks that the dispatchers can monitor. I did not see much of that in there, and that exponentially increases the cost of any system. So that's the take into account too.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, Heather, did you want to jump in first real quick? Give your thoughts before you have to leave?
She
Oh,
put her
okay.
thoughts
She already
in.
did. Sorry,
Yep.
I only saw the top of it. Documents very well put together. Table of content makes it much easier to find the material. You can tell that a lot of time and effort research went into getting this ready. Thanks for so much for allowing us to share feedback. Thank you, Heather. All right, back to you, Jason.
All right. Let's
Because
see.
we are starting to lose people, but I understand.
Yeah. Kate Rothwell.
Kate, are you still with us?
I
There
am
you
still
are.
with you. I wanted to say I was trying to drop it in the chat because I was getting ready to jump off the call too. But following Drew and Will's comments on the lack of attention for improvement to the EMS system is something I think should create some attention. Also looking at the impact of closing so many of the smaller dispatch centers. I mean, that's going to have an economic impact locally, personnel, as well as local dispatching advantages, right? Knowing the terrain. I'm not saying that the right systems couldn't pull up the information, but there are advantages to local dispatching.
Okay.
And then a concern where you don't have a choice in services, it almost winds up kind of looking like a monopoly, right? So what's going to set the rates and, lack of options, right? If it's one choice, this is what you've got. Those are my concerns there.
Sure.
I will follow suit with a couple of the other comments saying that it was a very, very long document that I haven't had, a chance to fully get through. But there was a lot of time and effort put into it. So.
Good. Thank you, Kate.
Okay. I don't recall Doug Hackett. I don't believe you've been on a call before.
Oh, I was on last night and I gave my opinion then.
Okay. Thank you. I was not sure. Thank you. Laura Hayden. And Laura has been typing in chat before, so okay, you'll submit your comments in writing. Okay, Michael Ranzio.
I guess I don't really have many suggestions for the document itself. It is very in depth. There was something I was going to add, but I don't remember now.
Thank you, Michael. William Moran.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just echo some of the comments I said before. I mean, first, I just want to thank, the contractors and certainly all the folks who've put a tremendous amount of time and effort into creating this document. I think it's a fairly comprehensive snapshot. But I think there are, just as I said before, there are some opportunities to enhance it. Just as Kate and Drew have said, I think putting a renewed interest on how this system is going to serve the emergency medical services system. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to Drew Hazelton and the EMS Advisory Committee as the enacting legislation that created the opportunity for the Advisory Committee to utilize state funding to design a statewide EMS system. Part of that enacting legislation required them to coordinate their activities with this group. And I think there's an opportunity to work together to ensure that there is paralleled effort and a unified vision on what an emergency medical services communication and information management system needs to do to be able to serve the end users. And I think there's an opportunity to provide a vision for what a 21st century EMS communication and information management system looks like. And this is there is no better opportunity than now to do that. So if there's anything that I can do out of my office, please let me know. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to the advisory committee, and Drew Hazelton is the chair of that committee. And we're certainly partners in this, and we'll look for opportunities to help enhance the report. Thank you.
Okay, and Carrie provided her comments. Document itself is comprehensive. Only able to skim parts of the document. Need to go back and reread to have better understanding. Concerned with the language of recommendation under option 4 of physical location when they are proposed as options. Concerned, let's see, not having the inventory referenced as it's not available yet. Felt there were some gaps, and we'll submit more detailed feedback through the website. Appreciate the work that went into creating it. Montpelier Police, along with Berry City, had Televate conduct a study for their agencies only months before, and there were a lot of redundancy in the information requested. However, it was a pleasure to work with them again. Okay, let's see. Nicole McKeegan.
I have a lot, but I think I might put a lot of it in, do it in a written form. There's just a lot of concerns coming. I mean, I came in last night at the end of your session. My other half was on there, so I heard his comments, which I mirror a lot, being that I am dispatched out of the Washington County Dispatch Center. So there's a lot of concerns if and when this ever gets implemented, and just seeing not only a department I'm on, but other smaller departments, whether they're EMS, smaller police agencies, fire. So I'm going to save a lot of my comments for the written part.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm still reviewing this fairly large document, and I just want to make sure I write what I really want to say instead of just putting it up today.
Nicole, can I ask one quick question? And you say that, is it really mostly focused on section 3.4, the physical? Is that where most of your concerns lie? Because I'm just.
I think it's on all of it. I mean, it's on, your funding, like, where are we getting the funding from? Basically, we would be merging, like I said, we're going from this many PSAPs. Either you're going to get Derby and Rutland back, or you're gonna shrink it down. So it's an overall thing. There's something from each section that I want to touch on.
Okay, appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next, Christian, were you on last night, I believe?
Yes, I was.
Okay, thank you. Todd Poole.
Yes, just quickly, I appreciate the comprehensiveness of the document, and I understand there's a balance here, right? You're looking at it, you're putting a plan together, and you're working with broad strokes at the 5,000-foot view, and you're trying to craft a certain direction or a generalized direction, and you can't go down a lot of rabbit holes because you don't know what the details are. So I understand that, and I appreciate the document, the way you guys put it together. 166 pages is a lot to swallow, but I also understand this is a huge project that's gone on for years, which involves many, many people, many, many technologies. So I just say good job with it. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
And
Is there is there anybody on here that we missed, or that was on a previous session that had something else to add today that maybe they realized since they were on last? All right. With that, and again, appreciate all that very, very much. Oh, Michael is adding. To add, is it possible to have an equipment, what the equipment list would look like? Some agencies are replacing their mobiles, portables, radios, and it would be a shame for the agencies to be purchasing equipment now that would not even be used in the future. Change. Hopes this makes sense. Yes, it does make sense. You know, we will, you know, take that into consideration. And then Martha, Jeff Mayo sitting in with Martha. Okay, so this is from Jeff. Realizes the first draft, but I, amongst many others, would like very specific information about retirement plans for dispatch staff. As Scott mentioned earlier, Hartford employees are on a different system than state employees, and we are quite happy with our current retirement plan. Thank you for that, Jeff. Those human resource elements, of course, are very important to take into consideration. And then Doug, do we have a date, time, or link to attend the funding meeting discussion? I'm gonna, do we still have Barb on here or Paul?
I am here.
Oh, you are here. Oh, you're on my second page. That's why. Okay.
Yes. I believe the funding meeting that's currently on the books is for a set of invited participants. I don't do we have one on the books for a more open discussion? I don't believe we do.
I don't believe we do at this
Not-
point. I think this is
not
the
at this
first
time.
one.
Right. I think maybe once the information, some preliminary information is gathered from this meeting that has the invited participants, there'll be more to discuss. There are a couple more community listening sessions next week, but I don't think the timing will be correct to actually have be able to provide more funding info by then. So it sounds like perhaps there's an interest in being involved in that discussion. So we can take that back to the task force and figure out what opportunities there might be for that.
Thank you, Barb. Barb, while you have the floor, do you want to finish up with next steps and?
Yeah, I sure can. So I mentioned a couple of them. First off, I want to say thanks very much to everyone that's here today. I thought it was a very good and educational and productive discussion. We do have, this is the last of the scheduled town halls, but we do have 2 community listening sessions next week. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that.
They are. They are.
Okay.
18th and the 20th,
so
you're correct.
That's right.
Okay,
One on
great.
the 18th, one on the 20th.
Perfect. We will take all of the feedback that we've received here today and in all of these other sessions and the feedback that is submitted through the web page into consideration. It will be given careful review and have lots of discussion around it. So we do appreciate all that. As a reminder, we are accepting online feedback through March 28th. So if you have thoughts that you shared today that you want to put in writing, that'd be great. Though we have recorded your feedback today. Or anything else you want to add, please feel free to do that. You can reach that the report and the form for submitting submitting comments at our website, which is on the Department of Public Safety webpage under boards and commissions. You will find us there. And also you can email us, of course, at the email shown on your screen. I don't have anything else. Bonnie, Jason?
There is
Paul?
a comment, Barb, from Jeff Mayo asking, why is that meeting by invite only and not open to all agencies affected?
Well, it's a preliminary discussion, I think is the best way to say that. There will be opportunities to discuss funding, but we need to have a bit of a framework in place, to put structure around the ideas and around the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And then another one, other than online comments, Barb, how can we stay involved and help the process?
Sure. So the task force meets every 2 weeks, and you are welcome to join those meetings to see where the project stands. Also, project updates are given on the website. You can participate in the task force meetings. There's always an opportunity for public comment there. And we do encourage you to attend those and to reach out through that or individually to any of us to continue to give your thoughts.
And not only that, Barb, the recordings of each of the other listening sessions are on the task force website currently. And this one will be up shortly after the meeting's over.
Good point. Thank you, Jason.
All right, excellent. Thank you all for taking so much time out of your day. It's obvious this is very near and dear to everybody's hearts, and we appreciate the commitment to hanging with us for now 2 hours now. We appreciate all the feedback, and we look forward to more engagement. You guys have a wonderful day and stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.